Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. Coming up, the Senate passes a new government funding bill that includes aid to Ukraine. We'll have more coming up. Plus, the invasion in Ukraine continues. Russian forces closed in on Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv. We'll bring you the new developments. Then later, share a heartfelt message from a group of young children to the citizens of Ukraine. And we take a look at big news coming out of the world of sports with Major League Baseball and some roster changes with several NFL teams. All these stories and more coming up next from the CBN Newsroom.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin this half hour with a crisis averted. The Senate voted 68-31 to pass a $1.5 trillion bill that will keep the government open through this year. Congress needed to pass the legislation by Friday to avoid a shutdown. The omnibus package includes the Hyde Amendment, restricting taxpayer funding for abortion. The bill is stripped of any new COVID relief funds, includes $13.6 billion in new aid to Ukraine, $12.6 billion in funding for the IRS, and $17.5 billion for high poverty schools from elementary to high school. President Biden will now have to sign the bill into law. Russian troops are facing stiff resistance as they draw closer to the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. And today, Russia may face more opposition from the global community. President Biden is expected to propose more economic pressure be placed on Moscow to stop the war and tens of thousands of Ukrainians from fleeing the country daily. Gary Lane brings our team coverage, followed by George Thomas in Ukraine.
As Russian forces closed in on Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv, this convoy of tanks approaching the city came under attack. A Ukrainian army ambush awaited them. Despite facing stiff Ukrainian resistance along the way, a senior U.S. defense official says Russian troops are now just 9 miles away from the center of Kyiv. And more hard hits may be coming for Russia, not only on the battlefield, but also on the diplomatic front. During talks with Polish officials in Warsaw Thursday, Vice President Harris said Russia should be investigated for committing war crimes.
We have been witnessing for weeks, and certainly just in the last 24 hours, atrocities of unimaginable proportion.
Chief among those horrors, the Ukrainian government says the Russians deliberately targeted this hospital in the southern port city of Mariupol, injuring pregnant women and killing 3 people, including a child. Russia denies that the Mariupol attack was on a hospital, saying it was an extremist base. Ukrainian President Zelensky says Russian troops have a clear order to hold Mariupol hostage to torture it. And in Washington today, President Biden is expected to request the G7 and America's European allies to join the United States in stripping Russia of its most favored nation trade status. That would further isolate the country and allow tariffs on Russian goods to be increased.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin.
And in Ukraine Thursday, CBN's Orphans Promise is busy throughout the country, caring for orphans and people in need as it has for years. In the city of Lviv, CBN's George Thomas joined a team of workers as they prepared to travel on a dangerous journey to deliver humanitarian relief supplies to an OP center near Kyiv.
This is a hub, this is a main point, and today hundreds of families are going through this Orphan Promise Partner ministry there, and they're really helping folks. So we're going to be sending these supplies. I'll be traveling with this convoy to Zhytomyr this weekend, and we'll hopefully bring you that story Monday morning.
As the fighting intensifies, another 60,000 fled Ukraine Thursday, passing through humanitarian corridors to the safety of neighboring nations like Poland. CBN's Operation Blessing is in that country, providing refugees with water, blankets, toiletry items, and other essential supplies. Food and hot meals are also being provided. Already, more than 2.3 million people have escaped Ukraine and are now living as refugees. And with the devastation of the war getting worse, millions more are expected to flee for safety to Poland and other countries. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Hey guys, this is George Thomas. I just left Lviv a couple of hours ago, and I'm headed east, close to Kyiv, the capital city of Ukraine. I'm accompanying this van behind me. It belongs to CBN's Orphans Promise, and they are taking a shipload of essential supplies to a center in called Busiliv. which in essence, every day this particular center that partners with Orphans Promise, about 200 refugees on a daily basis come to this particular shelter, find refuge, find a place to get a hot meal, to stay for the night, and then they're heading west to where I was. And check this out, just line upon line of cars, and we see this pretty much all across Ukraine today as people are getting out of the conflict zone in the central part and the eastern part of the country. Stay tuned this weekend to our CBN News platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'll be posting stories of what Operation Blessing and Orphans Promise is doing, and then continue to watch the 700 Club all next week as we bring you stories of what's going on today here in Ukraine. I'm George Thomas for CBN News, somewhere in the central part of Ukraine.
For many here in America, the suffering in Ukraine is personal. As Wendy Griffith shows us, Ukrainians in the U.S. are taking to the streets to protest Russia's invasion and pray for the protection of their homeland.
More than 200 people, many of them Ukrainians, are gathered here at the Virginia Beach oceanfront with signs, songs, and desperate prayers. They're hoping to raise awareness and funds for Ukrainians who are right now fighting not only for their country, but their very lives. Olga marched with her parents who came over just 2 months ago, but her brother is still in Ukraine.
Yes, my twin brother is in Kiev, and my son. And every day we wake up and make sure that he texts us that he's alive and he's okay. So as many people who's here, this is their life every day. We're just praying for everyone to be okay, but it's just hard to watch your city, your town to be destroyed.
Sergey is also worried about his brother, who is in the middle of the fighting.
Every morning I'm just wake up and call him if he's alive and everything's okay with him. We need to stop the bombs and rockets and everything. We just need to close sky.
The rally was organized by the Tidewater Ukrainian School, a group dedicated to promote and preserve the culture and language of Ukraine.
There is millions of refugees in Ukraine being displaced from their homes. We want to help them. We want to support people in America to know what's going on. Because right now Ukraine is being a shield for Europe, for Western values, and for freedom.
Among the marchers, Natalia Komyak with CBN's Orphans Promise. She says many of their centers in Ukraine are now serving as shelters for refugees fleeing the war and are equipped with mattresses, generators, and non-perishable food.
So this is such, again, another miracle and praise report that we were ready to receive the people, and they are ready right now. They have food to feed them.
Her prayer is simple, that her homeland will not be wiped off the map by a mad dictator.
We really need to press the government here today to close the airspace over Ukraine because people are dying. Some of my friends that are trying to get out right now cannot even get out of the house because of the heavy shelling. So I'm so happy to see that Americans are standing with Ukraine.
For now, marching, praying, and giving to the war effort is all most people, including many Ukrainians here in the U.S., can do, as they continue to hope and pray for a miracle. Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Virginia Beach.
In other news, across the country, coronavirus cases are falling, deaths down too. By the numbers, new infections have dropped 48% over the last 2 weeks. The country now averaging 40,000 new cases a day. Deaths are down 24% with an average of about 1,400 a day. But for those who fought COVID, it may be a long road to recovery. A new study out of Denmark found 53% of those surveyed still dealing with symptoms 6 to 12 months after infection. Coming up, we head to Jerusalem, where Chris Mitchell is standing by for a look at some other stories coming out of the Middle East. Stay with us. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Earlier this week, around 300 Ukrainian Jews arrived in Israel fleeing from the Russian war in Ukraine. And a new renegotiated Iranian nuclear deal is reportedly close to signing, but some believe this will only pave the way to more violence. And for more on these stories, we are joined now with our Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell, in Jerusalem. Welcome, Chris.
Great to see you, Mark.
You as well, sir. You know, you were there when the Ukrainian Jews arrived. What was the atmosphere like, and are there plans for Israel to help bring more of them to Israel?
Well, first of all, Mark, the atmosphere down there was bittersweet. Usually when, Jews make Aliyah or immigrate to Israel, it's a very happy scene. These people were happy to be safe, many glad to be in Israel. But, most of the women that we talked to and most of the people on that flight were women. They were heartbroken. And the reason for that is that they had to leave their husbands behind. And that was the first thing that really came to their heart when we talked to them. As you know, men in Ukraine between 18 and 60, they cannot leave the country and they have to stay and fight. And most of the people, as I said, were women and children. And your really heart goes out to them, Mark, since, about a month ago, they were leading a normal life. And now they're refugees. You can imagine they had a home, they had a livelihood, they had a neighborhood, they had friends. Now they're in a strange country that they will make a new home, but it's very, very difficult. Now, what Israel's going to be doing, they're going to be housing them in hotels and other places temporarily. They're going to give them a financial grant to get started. And then these people have to go through the absorption process, which most Israelis that immigrate will have to go through all the time. And, Mark, receiving Jews here in the land of Israel during times of crisis has really been part of Israel's history since its beginning in 1948.
Chris, what is the biblical connection with the arrival of immigrants in Israel?
Well, there's about 700 scriptures all the way through the Bible, and especially in the Hebrew scriptures, that God himself is going to bring his people back here to Israel. And I'll give you a few examples. For example, Isaiah says, I will bring your children back from the east, gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Ezekiel, the prophet, says, I will bring you back from the nations and gather you from the countries where you've been scattered. And Zechariah says, this is what the Lord Almighty says, I will save my people from the countries of the east and the west. I will bring them back to live here in Jerusalem. So for the past 150 years, it's been this prophetic fulfillment of what we see in the land today in Israel. These prophets and many others have prophesied. This is what we see happening. Many times it's in times of peace, but tragically it also happens in times of war like we see right now.
Chris, the new Iranian nuclear deal could be announced at any time now, but there are concerns by some that it will pave the way to a more violent Middle East. What specifically are their concerns?
That's exactly how many people feel over here, Mark. First of all, the deal expires in just a few years. That, in fact, is going to allow Iran to become a nuclear power. It allows them to keep their enriched uranium and advanced centrifuges. And then one thing that really bothers a lot of people here, frees up tens of billions of dollars so Iran can expand its terror attack activities throughout the Middle East, like Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria. And it also lifts sanctions on top Iranian officials like President Ibrahim Raisi. Now, he's responsible for the death of thousands of political prisoners. So what this all does, Mark, it puts Israel in the position of feeling like they may have to launch an attack to destroy Iran's nuclear program.
And quickly, Chris, what can we expect on tonight's Jerusalem Dateline?
Well, we have an interview from Ukraine with CBN's director there on the ground. He's talking about some of the miracles that people have seen and also how to pray. We take an in-depth look at the status of those Iranian negotiations in Vienna that we just talked about. And we also hear from some of those women that I talked about, too, what they were feeling, what they're saying about now starting a new life in Israel. We'll have that. We'll also have a video, maybe many people have seen it, of that little Ukrainian girl singing Let It Go in a bomb shelter. So all that's on this week's Jerusalem Dateline.
All right, our Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thanks for your work as always, Chris. And you can see more news from the Middle East with Chris and his team on the CBN News Channel tonight at 8:30 Eastern, or you can find it on the CBN News app. Still ahead, Sports Director Sean Brown joins us to discuss developing news in Major League Baseball and several changes with NFL teams. There are several big stories making headlines in the world of sports. First, after a 99-day lockout, Major League Baseball and its players reached a new collective bargaining agreement. And in football, two major trades between quarterbacks Carson Wentz and Russell Wilson, plus a surprise stay for quarterback Aaron Rodgers. For more on these stories, we're joined now by sports director Sean Brown. Sean, what can the Major League Baseball teams expect now that the lockout is over?
All right, Mark, after 99 days of jockeying for position between the Major League Baseball and the Players Association, baseball is back. The exciting part, we still have 162 games. Opening days, April 7th. This Sunday, March 13th, spring training will begin. The end of the season will be extended for 3 days just to get those games in. But there will be 9 doubleheaders, so that's also exciting. But at the end of the day, for the most part, both sides are relatively happy. I don't think this is the end of the situation, but at the very least, baseball is back, and we can look forward to that. Very exciting. Free agency will open soon, and so it's going to be exciting. People are going to be checking their phones to see who they got in the during the trades and whatnot. And so, very exciting time. Baseball is back.
All right, Sean, tell us more about the recent NFL trades with Carson Wentz and Russell Wilson, and what are your thoughts on the trades?
Let's start with Russell Wilson. A lot of times when quarterbacks are looking for teams, they're looking for teams that are going to be ready to win now. There's been friction between, I don't think it's a secret, there have been friction between, Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks for a few years now. And so now he's decided to move on to the Broncos, where he believes he can win. Even in a division, the AFC West, where Kansas City's been dominant, this team, the Denver Broncos, at the bottom of the division now, with an elite quarterback, now they can contend even with Kansas City at the top of the division. It's going to be very exciting to see, and I expect them to be very, very competitive. Moving on to the Washington Commanders, still getting used to saying that. They have been desperately searching for a quarterback, looking at all 32 teams, trying to figure out who they could get, even looking at Russell Wilson, who wasn't interested, obviously went to the Broncos, but finally they're able to negotiate with Indianapolis Colts for Carson Wentz. Such an upgrade. I will never rule out a guy who plays for an audience of one and Christ, our Lord. And so I'm very excited, happy for him for this second opportunity to prove what he can do with a great team. And I believe, obviously, it's a step up. We'll have to see. I do believe they're still going to select a quarterback in the draft, possibly in the first round. We will have to see. But big upgrade for the Washington Commanders.
And Sean, after months of speculation that Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers may retire, he has officially decided to stay and signed a 4-year extension. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm so sick of talking about Aaron Rodgers. It's like Aaron Rodgers has been on ESPN for the last 2 weeks consecutively, just Aaron Rodgers. Finally, the inevitable happened. He stayed. They signed him. Wonderful. Great job. They were competitive last year. I don't know why it was being considered that he would leave. Finally, both sides agree, and we can move on and talk about other things. But they will continue to contend. I would not be surprised if he leads them back to a Super Bowl and even win that. And so the great Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay. Very excited for that, and we'll have to see what happens. But finally, they got it done. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. All right, Sean Brown, our sports director. Thanks for the updates, as always, Sean.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, blessings to you. Well, coming up, we share a heartfelt message of support from a group of students to the citizens of Ukraine. Stay with us. Welcome back. Support for Ukraine is coming from people all over the world, including children. First graders at Kinney Elementary School in Dorchester, Massachusetts, are showing their support for the citizens of Ukraine with blue and yellow hearts. They call them heartfelts. Teachers at the school came up with the idea in an effort to help the children understand. Students say they want the people of Ukraine to feel the love because Russia is being a bully. Well, thanks for watching this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. And as the weekend begins, we leave you with this message of hope from recording artist Major. We hope it blesses you.
What if I told you hope was the key? Would you believe me? Well, you should. Because hope is not only the key, it's the major key. See what I did there? Nah, but for real. Contrary to popular belief, hope isn't pretending your current struggle ain't real. It's actually a brave champion mindset and posture to take in the midst of it all. Storm or sunshine. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Hope is not the denial of reality. It's a commitment to believe greater is on the other side of it.